coming back. And if this is your first time joining us, you are in for a huge treat this morning. I have Jeff Riseley with me this morning. Jeff is the founder of Sales Health Alliance, an organization that he formed just about 3 years ago, with his third year anniversary coming up in January. And this is an important conversation that we are going to have this morning about the mental health of sales folks. So whether you are a sales leader, whether you are a sales professional yourself, or a small business owner, this conversation is going to have a ton of great information for you. So I don't want to talk about Jeff. I want to bring Jeff on. So welcome, Jeff.
Hello. Nice to be here, Libby. I love the intro music to the coffee chat. Really kind of gets us rocking and rolling on an early start to the day. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And I have my, dare I say, fourth cup. I read your article on afternoon coffee, and I don't do it past probably 10 o'clock in the morning, but
nice.
It does help first thing in the morning.
For sure. I've started really playing around with, depending on like when my presentation is, it's timing that coffee, because if it's like a 1 p.m. presentation, I don't want to be crashing at that time. So it's, how do I delay that coffee by an extra hour or 90 minutes just so I'm hitting that peak? So yeah. I'm with you, drinking 1 coffee a day, but trying to time it perfectly to align when I need to peak exactly throughout the day. So
awesome. So again, Jeff, welcome. This is such an important conversation. I know that it's the end of the year, and even more so this time of year, the stress gets to all of us, I think. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as a business owner, I know that I certainly feel the stress more this time of year. But it's more happenstance that we scheduled this conversation, because mental health is something that needs to be talked about all year long, because it isn't just a seasonal thing. So, Jeff, you know, where I'd love to start with you, and I think maybe some people who've been following you for a while know your story, but I think it's a really compelling story to tell, because you yourself started or founded Sales Health Alliance out of some real personal reasons. So why don't you start by sharing your story?
Totally. Yeah. Happy to share. So I started in sales. I guess it's over a decade now, like 11 or 12 years ago now. It's crazy to think about what's changed over that time. But yeah, I started a company called World Trade Group, which is no longer in business, but it was the sort of classic boiler room type of sales environment that you would have seen in the kind of idolized in the 90s, and sort of that like boiler room type of sales environment. 200 dials a day, 2.5 hours of talk time. If you weren't hitting your metrics, you're let go pretty quickly. And on the surface, I did really well from an individual contributor standpoint, but behind the scenes, I was just not okay. I had really bad anxiety, insomnia, panic attacks in the middle of the night. And it was after the third panic attack that put me in the hospital when I thought, well, this is something that I need to start looking at and start to address. So first thing I did was I went to see my doctor. He prescribed me some anxiety medication, which I tried for 2 to 3 months, and really just didn't like how it made me feel. I felt like I lost touch with my intuition and my emotions, the things I was relying on to pick up on those, buying signals and connect with buyers. I felt like I lost that. So I stopped taking the medication, and going to therapy 10 years ago was still highly stigmatized. And that's where I was kind of at this crossroad in my life where, and I love so much about sales, but the rush you get when you close a big deal, the camaraderie, the learning, the growth, the career advancement opportunities. But if I wanted to stay in this industry, I'd need to figure out a way to make myself more essentially mentally resilient. So I just really started learning everything I could about, how does the brain work under stress? What is mental health actually? Why is it so hard to talk about? How do you start befriending your anxiety rather than treating it as something that you should be afraid of and run from and avoid? And I just started implementing the different things that I was learning over the next couple of years, and wasn't really sharing it with anyone, but it really became important when back in July of 2018, I just launched my first sales consulting website. And 3 days after that, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. So life threw this crazy curveball that I wasn't ready for. But it was during that experience where I started to realize that the same strategies I was using to take care of my mental health, my mindset, resilience, manage stress was equally applicable and more helpful during this next stressful period of my life. And after that experience, I started to reflect on what was important, what I wanted to do next. And I started to realize that anxiety in sales is not optional. It's really part of everyday life. And when salespeople and teams start to become anxious, depressed, or burnt out, the performance really starts to suffer. So my work and what I'm focused on is shifting the conversation to really start equipping sellers with the tools they need to navigate the stressful situations they face in sales in a mentally healthy way. And here we are today.
Yeah, yeah. And so first of all, how are you in
Yeah,
terms of
all
cancer?
all good. I caught it very early,
Good.
which I'm grateful for. I think that was part of anxiety, being more in tuned and being more aware of sort of micro changes in my body. So I was able to catch it early, and thankfully didn't need any chemo, but an unpleasant surgery. But other than that, I'm doing okay.
Good. Good.
Hmm.
Good. But you know, it brings up such an important point, and that is now cancer is a devastating diagnosis for anybody, but this old school idea that, you know, salespeople are tough, they're Teflon, you know, they live with rejection every single day and suck it up cupcake and, you know, all this stuff that is so traditional for sales organizations, as if the salesperson is like that's their life. It's the only thing that's going on in their life.
Hmm.
And so, you know, first and foremost, selling, having a sales job is just a job. It's just the career path. It's not your life.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that sales leaders need to pay attention to. But, you know, tell me a little bit about some of the big trends, the challenges that you're seeing for salespeople, particularly since this pandemic started.
For sure. So I think one of the biggest issues is this the challenge, the mental health, burnout. It's getting way worse. Like it's just accelerating. It's not getting better. And I can really see this in sort of my learning and the research that I've done, where prior to the pandemic, if you looked at sort of the average statistics around mental health, you'd see that the average population, 1 in 5 people would struggle with a mental health issue in any given year. That number, when I started to look at sales specifically back in December of 2019, I couldn't find any data specific to salespeople. So I wanted to survey and kind of get a sense of what the
Mhm.
community was dealing with. What I found was that number is more than 2 in 5 salespeople struggle with their mental health, which was 43%, which was already a huge number. If you think about it, in an industry that's so
Mhm.
focused on high performance, if
Yep.
43% are, you know, are not performing as they should because they're burnt out, that's a big issue in overall performance. And back in May of this year, I partnered with Uncrushed, an amazing mental health organization that everyone should check out if they're not, as well as Richard Harris from the Harris Consulting Group, who's another mental health advocate in the sales space. We ran this massive survey and collected almost 800 responses from the sales community. And now we found that problem has now grown to where 58% of salespeople are struggling with their mental health. So
Wow.
almost 3 in 5 people are just having a difficult time, not only navigating the external stressors that this pandemic has put on us, but also the internal stressors of constant rejection, deals falling through, starting at zero every single month.
Mhm.
So that's this combination where we're getting pulled apart from both sides right now, and we really need to start addressing this and really start having conversations around this topic. Um, I think I think one thing that I would also add is sales is very unique, and if you think about all of us growing up, we have experienced maybe a little bit of heartbreak in middle school or high school, and we'd experience sort of a high stress environment behind when we kind of write that university exam that was worth 80% of our mark and things like that. And then afterwards, we'd go on summer vacation, we'd take time off.
Right.
When we go into sales, the thing is we're facing these really difficult emotions every
Mhm.
single day. I know for me,
Mhm.
when I first started, I'd end the day and I'd just feel like I was buzzing. I'd have no idea what I'd be feeling. I just knew that it was
Mhm.
really uncomfortable and I wanted to avoid it and not deal with it as much as possible. So I think that's where sales teams really need to move away from having a fun drinking culture as sort of the solution to mental health,
Mhm.
and really start leaning into how do you manage stress? How do you manage your emotions? How do you become more adaptable to this high change, highly uncertain environment that we're working in every single day?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in and around sales teams, for 20 years. And so it seems from the outside that, the sales teams are the ones that have all the fun. They're
Mm,
the haves in the organization. And they get to have the parties and the conferences and the trips and, the contests and all of these things, and they get the big bucks. But behind the scenes, there's so much going on. And that rejection, I mean, I've also run my business 3 different times over the last 20 years, and that's the killer. I remember, oh gosh, it was, early 2000s. It was the first time I was in business for myself, and it was maybe the 22nd, 23rd of December, whatever the Friday was before
mhm,
Christmas, and I got an email saying that I didn't get this contract.
mm,
Just wanted to let you know. And it's like breaking up with somebody by text. Like, it's just not the thing to do. And that just put me into this huge spiral. Thankfully, my parents had come to visit for Christmas and were able to kind of lift me out of it. But man, like, it can really hit. Not every day. I mean, we expect it to a
mhm,
certain extent. But when it does hit, it hits, and it
mhm.
hits hard.
And it hits way harder when we're not offloading stress on a more consistent basis. I think what we
Mhm.
see in sales quite often is you're just grinding for 3, 4 months, 6 months, sometimes even an entire year before you're kind of working towards these 2 weeks off for the over the holidays. And
Mhm.
when we're operating in this state of distress consistently every single day, as opposed to managing that stress level, finding that optimal performance zone where we're calm and alert, but not totally overwhelmed and totally anxious and operating from place of fear and panic, it gets really hard where we're in that state of distress. Something very small, whether that's someone not responding to your email or
Mhm.
receiving an email at the end of the year when you're probably feeling tired and overwhelmed, perspective matters, and how we perceive stressors is a huge issue when we're feeling burnt out, because we all of a sudden started attaching, our brain is going to naturally be in a more defensive, more reactive state, and we're going to
Mhm.
be attaching more harm being done in the moment. We're going to be attaching and perceiving more future threat associated
Mhm.
with that taking place. So we're going to be thinking, oh, I didn't get this contract. How am I going to pay my bills next month? I'm going to have to give up my business. And you start kind of having that spiral take place. And then we're going to start attaching more challenge. With this small thing is going to feel way more challenging to overcome than a simple daily stressor that we can kind of shake off. So it's really, really important that we stop leaning so heavily on vacation or wellness days as this highly reactive strategy, and learning things that we can start doing at an individual level to become more aware of what declining mental health feels like in ourselves.
Yep.
What are some things that are unique to ourselves that work for us that we
Mhm.
enjoy doing to offload this stress on a daily basis, to help us become less reactive and stay in a state where we're able to perform our best from a
Yeah.
mental standpoint every single day.
Yeah. And, so as a sales professional or a business owner, we have to take this on for ourselves, and we have to take some accountability and ownership for doing the things that will help, you know, regulate us and reduce our anxiety, as you've just been talking about. But the role of the organization is also significant. I
Mhm.
mean, I remember it happening when we first got shut down. You weren't out on the road anymore. And so therefore, you weren't spending time between meetings.
Mm.
So, excuse me. So do more meetings.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a second. Like, I'm not commuting. And when I've done 7 sales calls in a day, which doesn't happen very often because that's just way too many,
Yeah.
it's exhausting. And so the expectation goes from, you know, this many meetings because you have to save drive time to this many meetings, and I'm talking about quality meetings, not the smile and dial stuff.
Hmm.
Um, like it's emotionally not not possible to
Yeah.
be up and on that much in a day.
Yeah.
So let's talk about
One thing I
where
would
sales leaders are getting it wrong. And then
okay.
let's make sure we talk about the tools and resources that you bring to an organization that can really support sales leaders and their people.
Yeah, so I think just in general, one of the biggest things that I'm seeing from sales leaders in terms of where they're getting it wrong right now is they're deferring to someone in HR or their people and culture team as you know, I focus on sales, I focus on generating revenue. These other departments can kind of worry about the people, culture, the well-being of my teams.
Mhm,
That's not necessarily my priority right now. And the issue we have with that strategy is someone in HR who's not familiar with what it's like to work in sales, for example, is going to approach the conversation from a very general standpoint. They're going to be treating their
mhm,
organization as a collective whole. And therefore, they're buying things like meditation apps or bringing yoga in, very sort of general solutions, and saying, here's our mental health strategy and here's what we're trying to do. Now, the issue with that is the thing about mental health is we should be approaching from a situation where our organization is a collection of individual departments that are each facing their own unique stressors that are
mm,
totally different. Someone working in sales facing stressors or of rejection, deals falling through is going to be totally different than someone working in ops that's under a deadline, or a software developer that's having to code for multiple weeks in a row during a
mhm,
sprint, or someone in HR that's had to lay off 10 people. Like these are all add stress to the body, but different contexts that, not saying that meditation or yoga sort of sessions don't help. They really, really do, but they need to be placed in the context of those daily stressors. So within
mm,
sales, like when should you meditate? What's the best way to leverage that strategy? When should you be doing, a fast breathing exercise versus a deep breathing exercise? How do you start using these different things to offload stress and manage stress on a daily basis in the context of your own role? So that's
mhm,
like the biggest area that I see sales leaders getting it wrong is they're deferring to these other departments that have no context of what it's like to work in sales. The sales leaders really need to be playing this active role in learning about this stuff, learning about
mhm.
the mental aspect, the mindset. How do you kind of start leveraging these things to start being that coach on a daily basis to say, hey, when someone's feeling anxious, like, hey, remember that article we read, remember that training we did, or remember sort of the analytics that we're collecting in our team? Here is some of the things we can be doing as sort of this nice supportive network. So that would be kind of the big thing I would say. I would say the other issue is they're not investing enough into things like mindset, resilience, stress management tactics, and they're not investing into technologies. Leon Health Sciences is a really great one that's starting to capture predictive burnout metrics, so
Mm,
teams can start to understand how their team is doing on a daily or a weekly basis versus waiting for that engagement survey 6 months out that doesn't really tell you anything. It's
right.
how do you kind of get that daily input of metrics to start
Yeah.
carving out your behavior. And then the last thing is when you think about uh, sort of these wellness days or these summer vacations that have been very, very popular, these are highly reactive strategies, and we're being used under the assumption that, one, people know what to do on those wellness days to offload stress, which I would agree that most people don't. And
Mm,
two, as part of those wellness days, is your team actually engaged and motivated and bought into that mission, that company mission that you're trying to achieve, that global problem that you're trying to solve? Are they bought in enough to want to be motivated to use that time off to come back fresh?
right.
Are they motivated to want to invest that time into, like you said, bettering their mental health and recovering from stress? Because
Mm,
again, you don't really care about your job if you're not bought into the mission. Well, maybe I'd rather go drink beers with a friend in a park or play video games or do things that, aren't necessarily conducive to what I need to do to perform at best.
right. Right. That's interesting. And there are these sort of grand assumptions that all salespeople are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
So, you talked about beers, beers, drinks on early Friday afternoon. That is a very unhealthy strategy at the best of times and
Hmm.
can be devastatingly unhealthy for anybody who might be struggling a little bit behind the scenes.
100%. It's something
And
that I.
and to be a part of something, it's I don't want to be with my colleagues. If you're calling it a day at 2 o'clock on Friday,
Hmm.
I want to have that choice. And
Hmm.
so sales leaders, I think, it sounds like being super hard on sales leaders. Sales leaders also suffer from
Totally.
all of these same issues, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
right? We're all humans last time I checked. But, trying to be the hero and come up with the singular approach is just not the thing, is what I'm hearing. So,
Yeah.
so how do you work then with sales teams? Tell us what it is specifically that you can do, and this is going to be, extremely important. Sales leaders start to put some budget aside and think about where you're going to bring Jeff in, because this is where it really matters. So, tell us the resources, the tools, and how you work with sales organizations.
Yeah. So the what I do is I'm a one person company from the Sales Health Alliance. So the work that I do is I've built out multiple programs, developed books, developed resources to really start working with your team around best practices associated with things like mindset, around building awareness around mental health, having more vulnerable conversations on a day-to-day basis, but also in the context of how do you navigate the unique stressors of like we've been talking about rejection. How do you use these tools to change your mindset really quickly when it starts to turn negative? How do you offload stress more regularly on a daily basis and find a program that's right for yourself and adapted to your body, because it's going to be different for everybody?
Mhm.
So that's really what I've been doing over the last year. I guess last year, yeah. In the last year, over 3,000 salespeople have been through the programs, working with organizations like Outreach or Shopify, DoorDash. Really, these leading global brands that are seeing this as a huge opportunity to improve the mental game and work with their sellers to help tackle this huge problem that's impacting performance. So that's primarily what I do. It's working with teams, coaching them, um, moving more into sort of past these initial programs. How do we kind of start implementing analytics? How do we start tracking this stuff on a daily basis? If you think
Mhm.
about, metrics around how many dials a rep is making, how many length of sales cycle, how many deals are closing, we're using these metrics and looking at them every single day to say, like, how is our sales team doing? How are they performing? When in
Mm.
fact, these are all lagging indicators of how well that person is feeling overall. And we really
Mhm.
need to start getting into a position where, are they feeling burnt out? Are they anxious? Are they depressed? What's their level of self-esteem? Are they bought in right now to the company vision? All of these indicators of how someone is doing overall needs to start be needs to be measured more regularly on a daily or a weekly basis, so that teams and leaders can actually start actioning this stuff going forward. And again, I mentioned them earlier, but that's why I really love what Leon is doing. They're sort of, like I said, this predictive analytics, burnout analytics company that's doing a lot of great work in this space. So
Mhm.
partnering with them to start implementing some of these systematic changes into organizations on top of those programs is a really holistic, preventative way to address this problem as a whole.
I think that's huge. I mean, I was re-listening to Marilyn Barefoot's podcast, Breaking Brave, where you were her guest, and you were talking about a situation when you were in the midst of your anxiety challenges. You were put on a PIP,
Hmm.
a performance improvement plan,
Hmm.
because your results weren't exactly where they needed to be. Like you know, that's looking at numbers and saying, "Boy, Jeff must not be really trying hard anymore.
Yeah.
Let's put the fear of God into him and see if he can rally." Now you did. I
Hmm.
listened to the story and it's remarkable. I don't know if I could have been as resilient to that kind of feedback as you were. But that's something that I think sales leaders really need to pay attention to, is what is going on
Hmm.
for this person, that might be at cause.
Yeah.
Your
You're,
best salespeople didn't get lazy overnight all of a sudden.
mhm. And but that's the thing. It's so much easier to say, let's use fear, let's put someone on a pip and see what happens, as opposed
Mhm.
to, hey, let's actually like pause for a second. Let's assume some positive intent. Let's get curious. Let's be compassionate to what's going on in this person's life. And let's start kind of having a more open conversation about, what's going on in their day to day that might be impacting this.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat to this is for the sales leaders that are not putting the work in to build that trust, to build that psychological safety, if they're not leading with vulnerability every single day, well, and you're sort of leading from a position where they see other people getting put on pips and fear is sort of the main motivator, you're totally screwed, because that rep isn't going to open up, and you're never going to resolve that underlying performance issue because you've never put the work in to create a safe space and build the trust. So sales leaders absolutely need to be leaning into this, because performance improvement programs are just so stupid, and they are just so counterintuitive to anything,
Yes, they are.
everything, and anything that you need for a human to perform their best. A pip is the last possible thing you should be doing in those
Yeah.
situations.
So if you were in human resources and on this call, pay attention to that last point that Jeff just made. Now, if you are a sales leader, part of the strategy of attracting and retaining the very best talent is to be able to promote that you have a great onboarding program, that you have great, plans to develop people and have them progress inside the organization. And it's going to be a learning organization, et cetera, et cetera. This is just as important as all of that other stuff. This needs to be a part of the package to attract and retain the very best for your organization, because it's become so prevalent. Someday, maybe the pandemic will end, but people will have choice. And you've heard about the Great Resignation and all of that kind of thing. So make this a part of your strategy. So Jeff, I wish we had more time. We don't. I want people to know how to get in touch with you. So Jeff at saleshealthalliance.com. And of course, there's your website. You can see all of the fantastic resources. If you're a salesperson who, isn't part of a large organization, check out Jeff's website as well.
Mm-hmm.
But sales leaders, please reach out to Jeff. You owe this to your people, and you owe this to yourself.
Appreciate you having me on, and I'm really excited to kind of have more people talking about this conversation. And yeah, check out the website. I just wrote a book a few months ago, and that's on my LinkedIn profile as well. So check that
Yes.
out if you want to start learning a little bit more about kind of how I approach this topic. It's a really easy way to access it. But yeah, again, thanks for creating space for this conversation, Libby. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you, Jeff. And so this is it for the end of the year. You're the great crescendo to the year for Coffee and Conversations. We'll continue this conversation in a couple of other ways in January. We've got Marcella Kimmel, who's going to be talking about, staying healthy from a body perspective, with health and wellness and fitness. And I've got a great story at the end of January with Jordan Rossman, top real estate performer, doing some remarkable things, but somebody who has also been very open about his mental health challenges and how he's addressed them all. So, Jeff, again, thank you so much. Happy holidays to everyone. Thank you for attending, and we will see you in the new year.
Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.
Bye.